Women on a Green Mission. Follow along as two friends document their unfurling permaculture journeys.
Join our chats each week where we'll be sharing how we and others apply permaculture to our gardens and daily life.
We're no experts. We're at the start of our journey, fumbling our way to a greener life. We love your company along the way. Well, hello.
Hello.
So, I'm going to just, preface this with, if you hear any weird and wonderful noises, that's, I've got Bridget, my dog, sitting beside me, losing her shit over the fact that we have hot air balloons currently going over the house. So she hates, as you can hear, she hates hot air balloons. So she might be a bit grumbly and mumbly in the background.
Funny.
So I apologise.
I wonder what it is about them.
Oh, I don't know, but sometimes like you can hear like they're really, really close over, and you can hear like the burners going off, and like we've had them like land in the paddock behind us, and it's so they've been quite
more sense.
Yeah, they've been quite close.
What have you been up to this week?
Oh, it's just been, I think the minutiae of life this week. Just getting down and picked the last of the cucumbers. So I'm going to do some quick pickle cucumbers. We dehydrated some kaffir lime skins, some rind, so that that's all jarred up now. We've picked just under a kilo of kumquat, so they're about to go into the freezer, waiting for the next batch, and then we'll do a kumquat and I think kumquat and ginger marmalade. I think this time.
What do you do with the kaffir lime skins?
So we dehydrate them and then chop them up and use them for curry powder. So we put them in red and green curry paste. Or, well, not powder, but paste. Yeah, so when we're making up our own paste. Or even then just to, we'll blitz it up into like a really fine powder and then might put that through some mayonnaise as a bit of like a, like a salad cream, like a salad dressing, or, sprinkle it on some fish or some chicken, or, just there's heaps of ways. And sometimes just walk past and sniff it because it smells so bloody good. So it's really nice.
Yeah, Mum had a tree and we used the leaves. Yeah, we used the leaves a lot, but I never knew what to do with the fruit and the skin. And I knew you could use it in like cosmetics and those kinds of things, but a lot of people say it's like a bit bitter to use in other things. But that's interesting.
The fruit, the fruit itself, like the juice and the flesh, is quite bitter. But I think that's got benefit as well. And I actually think the poor old, kaffir lime fruit is much maligned. Yeah, we just use the skin, we use the leaves, and, we don't use the fruit at all. But like, I think there's a lot of things you can do with the fruit. And a lot of people have said to us too, that you don't get much juice out of the limes themselves, out of the fruit. But when we juice, we had three quite substantial sized fruits. And I mean, we still got yay much juice. I'd probably say we got about 200 mil or maybe 150 mil. Yeah.
That's pretty good. Well, this week, after speaking to Will, I've printed out my plans to scale from the Draftsman.
Yep.
And I've been thinking about what he was saying about, like, once you've done your plan, to go back once you've implemented things and redo it. So even though I haven't done a lot since I did my plan, I kind of put my thinking cap on and went, okay, well, if I do this and this, what effects that going to have? And I really loved what he was saying about thinking about your views and those kinds of things. So I actually kind of, where the windows were, put in like a V, so like that would be what I could see out the window, and coloured it in so I know whatever I plant there will be within my view.
Yep.
So yeah, I've tried to kind of start thinking about it more how he was saying, like, what are the impacts of the things you're going to do, and try and think ahead a little bit. And I plotted out what specific trees we have planted already on the map, so I know and I can remember the varieties and the different species of grevilleas and things that we've planted. So yeah, I spent a bit of time scribbling on there. I had to get the plans finalised anyway because our plans get submitted in 2 weeks, so we're trying to get a hustle on and get everything finished and over the line. But it was a really good opportunity and refresher after talking to Will to just see my site sector analysis again with fresh eyes and just think about some different things that I hadn't initially thought about when I was doing my first site sector and bubble mapping and planning for the property. So yeah, it was really good.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I'm going to be doing the same. I'm going to go back probably over winter, when it gets sort of
Mm,
that we get those really cold and wet
yeah.
windy days, and just sort of sit down with that design and rethink that, because obviously,
Mm,
yeah, today we're talking about our why. So looking at, why are
mm-hmm,
we doing this for ourselves, and what our vision statements are. And that was part of, one of the very first things we actually did in our permaculture design course, because without that, you just kind of, you're driving with your eyes closed, really, because there's no reason for you to be doing it. So what I found, though, is going back and having a look
mm,
at our vision statement and really delving back into what our why was, is how things have changed. So what's actually stayed the same for us and what has shifted slightly. So I
mm,
wouldn't say changed. It hasn't changed. It's just maybe shifted. So some other things are a little bit more important than they were 12 months ago. And some other things have,
mm,
just taken a little bit more of a back seat. So that was interesting as well. So I think this, revisiting over and over again is
yeah.
so helpful, so valuable in in anyone's journey, and
Mm,
understanding why they're doing something, what they're doing it, and how they're doing it, and making those adjustments as you go. Because if you've just got
yeah.
that plan and you blindly follow the plan without having those making the observations and making the adjustments, then you end up with exactly what you planned for,
Mm.
without the considerations that you discover along the way. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I almost want to go back and do another PDC already. Like I need to sit down and go over my notes, like first and foremost, and almost go through each of the days all
Yeah.
over again. But I just think going to do another course, 18 months, 2 years down the track would be so good to I have someone else teach and like a different perspective on the
Mm.
course, but also just doing that a bit further down my journey would give me so much more insight again. But I
Yeah.
loved how
Yeah.
Brett really drummed into us to start with our why and the people who live on that property with you and what it all means to you. Because, like you said, we are the core of our properties. A massive part of our properties is the home and the homestead
Mm-hmm.
and the immediate surrounds. So, yeah, you really have to think about not just your why, but your values and how that is all going to kind of fit in with how you see your life. So yeah, do we want to share our vision statements?
I think so. I think that'd be nice to do. I still got teary reading mine out, or reading mine the other day, even though, yeah, some things have
Oh,
changed. It's
yeah,
still, yeah, it's still hit. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was still like, yeah, this is still the place
yeah,
that we want
it's
to
so
be.
personal.
And it really is. And it's not
Yeah.
something that is, your why's not a well-written intellectual, piece. It's something that comes from the heart. Like, it's, if you, well, as Brett said, and I totally agree, unless you really feel that emotion, then it's really not why enough. Because you know what, when shit gets hard, and it gets hard, it's like anything that you do in life.
Mm,
You're going to come across challenges. The seasons are, um, so dynamically opposed at the moment. Like, stupid hot summers, and
mm,
now we've had a ridiculous amount of rain, and all those challenges that come into it, let alone life challenges, family challenges, health challenge. There's so many different things that can take you off track. And if you don't have a strong enough why as to the reason why you're
mm,
going to get up and keep going, and stick to the journey, basically, then you won't. You'll fall off, and you'll look at it, a couple of years down the track, and go, well, I didn't really achieve anything. I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve. So it's really important. But yeah,
yeah,
I'm happy to share mine first, if you like.
go for it.
Alrighty. So Farmlet, which is our property, is thriving with perennial and annual fruit, nuts, medicinal herbs, and vegetables. It feeds and shelters our animals so that they can express themselves to the highest level, while supporting us, our community, and the earth with nutritious food. We have goats for dairy and entertainment, poultry for eggs, meat, and freckle removal, and pet horses for love and manure, sheep, well, because, and dogs for sanity. Scattered throughout are warm sheltered spots and shady, cool microclimates created from shelter and fodder belts and native groves that provide bush tucker, attract wildlife, support pollinators, and display vibrant splashes of colour throughout the seasons. The niche campsite we have provides opportunities for like hearted people to stay and experience how we work together, and how we work with earth care, people care, and future care. We sell produce and homesteading style products through our farm gate and produce boxes. This earns enough of the property to be cost neutral and affords us the opportunity to make a sustainable income. It is a place where family and friends, old and new, can exchange knowledge, inspiration, and ideas. When we are compost, our legacy is leaving the patch of earth we currently have guardianship over in a healthier and more productive state for the next stewards to take forth.
Oh, that's lovely. And so, thinking back on it now, what are some of the things you think that you might tweak? Because you mentioned that.
So I think for us, the farm gate, we will still do something along those lines, but it may just actually be a produce share and it may not involve any sort of monetary exchange. Um, it's not something that
Mm-hmm.
we're focused on with, as I said, like earlier with, getting an income from the eggs. Um, it's just not
Mm.
something that we're that hung up on or focused on, and we don't need. So we're not making this our primary income. So therefore, it's not a huge
Yeah.
focus. And we've done that because we still have what I call our day jobs. Um, we still have our day jobs. We're quite comfortable in that space. It affords us the ability to do what we want here, and not have to stress about finances as well. And that's a big thing for us for where we've been in the
Mm-hmm.
past with a few things that have happened in life when things have been really tight. We don't want to necessarily go back there, um, or put the pressure on ourselves to
Mm.
have to earn an income from the property and then take away that enjoyment. This is our happy place and our safe space, and I don't necessarily want to put that extra pressure
Mm.
on us. And I know that we've been there before, so yeah. So I think that will change.
Yeah.
Goats, maybe, they're still in the picture. I still really want goats, but there's a lot of infrastructure that has to go in because otherwise our goats are going to be community goats, because
Yeah.
they will go and visit everyone else because our
Yeah.
fences are shocking. They keep the sheep in because sheep are fat and lazy,
Yeah.
and well, our sheep are fat and lazy, and they will stay with the horses and stay where the food is. But I know that goats, the minute they can escape, they
Yeah.
will. Um, but yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's really the things that have changed. Everything else, is on the cards,
Mm.
is planned for. Yeah. What about you? What's yours? I want to hear
Mm.
yours.
Um, Mine was a lot more general because we didn't have land at the time. So we were planning for a piece of land that we wanted to buy that we ended up missing out on. So we tried to make ours a bit more general and less specific so that if our plans changed, it would still kind of fit into that statement. It was more like our core values and like what we would aspire to. But yeah, it's kind of a bit less specific than yours. Ours is to create a refuge and retreat on our land, a place where our family feels safe and secure. We're nurtured by the land and the environment that we have created. Our gardens provide us with seasonal nourishment and joy, and they're productive and abundant. Our land provides an income and allows us to live and work harmoniously. Our home is a place to gather for family and friends. It has spaces where we congregate, play, and relax. It is a place of beauty and wonderment, which hits me in the heart feels, but also I have to like laugh a little bit about it because it's like our it provides us with food. Well, no, the kangaroo's eating it,
Yeah.
and our family can come and gather. Well, no, but because there's mud everywhere at the moment, so it's very aspirational. It's an aspirational vision statement currently. It's not exactly a refuge and retreat currently, and the environment is not nurturing us. So,
The environment is smashing you, and you're
yes.
nurturing the wildlife. But
And we're definitely not making an income. It's actually drawing all of our finances away from us. But like I said,
reality.
that's the goal. That's the aim.
And
Yes,
that's the
that's
thing.
our vision.
Yep.
It's not yeah.
That's it.
So,
It's
but
the thing
it
that
is very
draws you.
inspirational. Like, it's something for us to keep working towards, and it's something when we are in the trenches, we can read it and go, no, this is what we want. And like you said, this is why we're doing what we're doing. This
Exactly.
is
It's
what we
the
want to
why.
achieve. This is where we'll be. Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but I did have to have a little laugh because I was like, our current situation is exactly opposite of what I just read out.
Well, your family is safe and secure, though. Your family is safe and secure where you are.
Yes,
You are now safe and
true,
secured in your
true.
tiny
So we're
home
getting
on your
there.
block. You have purchased your block,
Yeah.
so there is a level of security. And I know some people might go, "Oh, that's perceived security," but in our modern age, it's as secure
Mm.
as you can be, isn't it? Like it's
Yeah.
that's the way it is.
And I do have to say, like, with all the mud and everything, like Oscar had, I've actually had a really rough time the last couple of days with it. I think it's really kind of beat me down. Oscar was having a tough time about 2 weeks ago, so it's good. Like, we kind of go through phases. I was fine. I was soldiering through up until a couple of days ago, but yeah, it was like he had a rough day one day, and we came inside and the kids were just giggling and laughing and they were so happy, and the dogs were at Oscar's feet, and we had a cup of tea and we were sitting there, and I was like, you know what, this is all that matters, babe. I was like, I know it's really tough right now, but like, we're all under one roof, the dogs are
Yep,
here now, we've got the kids, they're happy, they don't give a shit, like, it doesn't matter. Like, yes, we're pooping in a bucket because we don't have septic at the moment, and yes, there's mud everywhere, but like, we're together and we're safe. And like I was telling Joe before we hit record, I found out another one of my friends has got cancer, and Joe's had someone close to her, and her partner is really unwell, and that's all that matters. We're here and we're together, and the kids are happy, and
exactly. You got
we'll get
family.
through this part.
You've got each other. You've got
Yeah,
family, and you can make anything else work. Anything else over and above that is just it's an absolute bonus.
yeah. So I guess it's kind of a good segue into talking about from like our vision to zones in our property. So we'll
Mhm.
talk to us about site sector, and then prior to that, you do your base map, and then after that, you start thinking about your zones and your bubble map. And zone 00 is the zone that we started with on our permaculture course, which is us. And I guess that's kind of why our vision statement matters so much, to get that kind of nutted out before we start doing our bubble mapping and thinking about our zones. So, yeah, it's kind of a good segue into talking about zones in a permaculture property and how that works and how that relates to our vision statement and our why, and it all kind of interlinks.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, starting with self when we talk about zones, and that was something that sort of makes so much sense to me, but kind of put me off. Like, well, it didn't put me off, but it sort of, I went, oh, I suppose surprised me is the words, if I can word properly today.
Mm,
Um, is that we start with the self. We start with us as individuals because it's important for us to be in the right frame of mind about what we're doing. Like having all these zones
mm,
outside and in the garden and all the rest of it, that's fantastic. But if our mindset isn't right, or we don't understand what our own principles and our ethics and our values are, then it's very hard to take that out into the next phase, or even bring it into the home and then take it out into the garden and into those zones. And there's lots of things that can actually
mm,
influence yourself, so zone 00, and they're things too that you can also challenge from time to time. So they might be your beliefs, and they might be someone else's beliefs that you've taken on,
mm.
because we do that as we get older. We start to unpack what we think we know, um,
Yeah.
and start to align that with our experiences of life and say, well, hey, do I actually really believe this, or is this something that I've
Mm,
taken from my parents or my community? Where has this actually come from? And so culture,
yeah.
religion, there's all these different things that can come into um, to play when you're looking at yourself. But I think the biggest thing is your mindset and what you believe, and how you show up
Mm,
for you every day. Do you reckon that's a fair sort of
mm.
estimate?
Yeah, and I think also the activity that we did with have needs and wants, I know that's kind of a separate thing, but I think that also clarified to me what my zone 00 and zone 0 needed to be, because when you think about your have needs and wants, you go, well, is it really a need? Do I really need that? Or is it a want? You know, and you kind of, it helps you also reassess your values. Like, I know it's meant to be a stock take on physical stuff or skills that you have, but it also did made me think, like, what do I actually need in my homestead versus what do I want, and what do I need as a person? I need shelter, and I need, you know, thermal comfort, and I need these things, but, you know, what do I really need versus what's quite unnecessary now? And I think doing a permaculture course obviously makes you reassess some of those things. You know, you might have already been questioning that in your life, and it's a good chance to take stock of that. So I think at the same time, doing that have needs wants list helps when you're thinking about your zone 00 and your vision statement. And like you said, as you get older, you know, or, you know, as you develop as a person, even, you do change your beliefs, so you do change your thoughts and your patterns, and you assess things. So yeah, that was a really helpful activity that we did as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think without looking at that, um, you just don't have that baseline, and you need that
Mm.
baseline to be able to move forward. Yep. Yep. I
Yeah.
love that.
And before we start talking about zones too much further, going outside zone 00, is when you start physically looking at it. So zone 0 being the homestead, 1 being the next space, and it kind of being a concentric circle outwards. They're based on, 1, how often you're going to use that element,
Hmm.
and 2, how often we need to service that element. You know, so chickens, for instance, you know, you need to be able to maybe hear them or see them. You might need to collect eggs once or twice a day. You might need to feed them. So, you know, how many times are you visiting that element? Or, you know, your bins you might do once a week, or you might not have a bin service at all, and you need to think about how else you use waste. So yeah, that those two things, how often we need to use it and how often we need to service it, are pretty much how you determine what your zones are. Zones aren't hard boundaries, so they're not kind of fenced off in little pockets of your homestead or your property, and they can blend into each other. So you might, you know, have a zone 2 that's a bit closer and bleeds into your zone 1 area. So just to kind of think about that. And even though I said they're concentric circles moving out, that's kind of the concept in your head. You don't literally draw circles and go, oh, all my zone 2s have to be in here. It's how your house is shaped and how your property is shaped affects where your zones
Yeah.
are. So
And that was
yeah.
something too that as we went through the process, I had to keep readjusting
Mm.
because I would base it on one criteria. So, for example, like my chickens,
Yes.
we go there twice a day. Same with the horses, because we feed morning and afternoon. So I'm going, okay, well, does that make that a zone 1 because I'm actually there more than once a
Yeah.
day, or does that make it a zone 2 or a zone 3? And the thing that really came through for me is that I can call it whatever the bloody hell I like. It makes no
Yes.
difference. It was more about consideration of where do I need to go? Where am I trafficking through my property? Where are the high traffic areas so that I know where to place things? And um, if we actually, and I probably should do a little video, but as we move through our property, so basically we can move through in the morning feeding our animals, and and, and dealing with our barking dog. Um, but we can move through our property, feeding our animals, checking on the gardens. We can pretty much check on everything that we need to, just by doing a loop. We don't have to double back in any way, shape, or form. And so
Mm.
we can check on the kitchen garden, we can check on part of the orchard, we can check on the ducks and the chickens, because even though we've got a lot of automatic systems, like we've got automatic waterers, we've got dusk and dawn doors, that go up and down.
Mm.
We've got gravity fed feeding barrels. So technically, we don't actually have to check on them every day. We could collect the eggs every other day. But part of our animal management strategy is to make sure that we lay eyes on our animal, or someone lays eyes on our animals twice a day, because things can happen. We've had
Mm.
eagles come in and attack the chickens, and we've had ducks stuck in weird places. So it's always good just to do that. So I kind of got a little bit miffed when I first started with the zones, going, well, which zone is it? Like, it doesn't make
Mm.
any sense to me. And then I realized that, yeah, it really just doesn't matter that much when it comes to that, because what could be considered a zone 1 or a 2 for me might be a 3 or 4 for someone else, and that's okay.
Mm.
So there
Yeah.
is no hard and fast rules with that. So that's something that I really
Yeah.
wanted to convey as well.
Yeah, I think it's more just that consideration of thinking, okay, well, don't put the chickens in the very, very far backhand corner.
Exactly.
Like you said, it's not a hard and fast rule. It's more just to help you consider where to put things if there are no structures, or maybe where to move things when you get the chance later on. Um, so when we spoke to Will, I think he made a really good point about zone 0. So zone 0 is the house itself, or your homestead, the center of all the activity. And unless you have a bare patch that you're buying, it's often dictated for you.
Hmm.
And then obviously, if you're like me and you're buying land, you can actually pick where that goes. So some considerations would be, northern aspect, getting enough airflow through your house, where your windows are positioned. But a lot of this, if you have an existing property, would be retrofitting. So,
Hmm.
you might change where your laundry is, or add a door somewhere, or add a window, or put some awnings on to stop the western sun coming in. So there's a lot of things you can do in your zone 0 to retrofit to make sure that flow of energy inside and around your house works really well.
Hmm.
I loved what Will said when he said, you take the basket of laundry out full and you can come back with it full, not of clothes, but of produce or things that you need from outside. Now my dog's going. Stuff that you can bring in from outside. So there is those considerations,
Yeah.
even though you have an existing house that you can tweak or change or plan for or plan around. One of the things he was talking about was, really bad views. Can you plant something nice to draw you outside? So these are things to think about with zone 0.
Yeah, and I think too with that, um, you zone 0 and for everyone, that I suppose home could be different. Like some people, as
Mm.
you were living in your caravan, so
Yeah.
your 0 was still the van, but the location of that van changed. And as we go through the zones too, we'll sort of unpack those as to like what that could look like and what happens there, because I think that that's really a
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
point, because what you know one zone is for one person or one property or one location is very different to another. So yeah, so zone
Mm.
one
Mm.
is essentially closest to your living space, so it's closest to your zone 0. And I suppose frequency, it would be
Mm-hmm.
fair to say that you'd be heading into zone 1 at least 2 to 3 times a day, possibly even more. And it's a really
Mm.
intensive type zone. It's got a high traffic, high human interaction, and it's the quick access to the daily necessities, right? Like it's, as you were saying, it's the washing line, it's the kitchen garden. So you're going out to hang the washing out, and you're bringing in your fresh produce for the day that you're going to use to cook, meals with. It's accessing wood for heating or wood for
Mm-hmm.
cooking as well. So the last thing you want to do is put your woodshed right down the other end of the property because you think that's the best place for it because it might be a little bit ugly. And then, you find out at 5 o'clock on a winter's afternoon that, oh shit, you don't have enough timber inside. You've got to go out and get it. So it's raining, it's cold, it's dark, now you've got to haul all this timber from the other end of the property. So it's those sort of considerations
Mm.
around what you need to access on a very, very frequent basis. So is there anything else there that you can think of, Elise, that would be considered zone 1?
Things like your worm farms or bokashi bins or composting can often be, or even maybe like a intermediate step between your big compost, so things that you
Hmm.
are having to put things in regularly. They can be a lot closer. Water tanks, those kinds of things that you
Hmm.
rely on, they're often part of your zone 1. Even though you're not visiting them, you do utilize them a lot, obviously, during the day. So yeah, it's definitely that intensive system, and pretty much it would not keep operating without human interaction or
Hmm.
intervention.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. I think that's a really good way to sum that up for sure.
Moving on to zone 2. So this zone is also used quite intensively, but a
Hmm.
bit less than zone 1. So it can be things that are a little bit bigger maybe, or less frequently used. So like we said, before, that dictates what your zones are, but they do need frequent-ish attention. So they can be things like perennial vegetables, where you're
Mhm.
not having to obviously be with them all the time. Orchards, fruit trees, your compost bin could fall into that category. Beehives, dams, ponds, um, chickens, poultry, that could be either a zone 1 or zone 2, depending
Yep.
how you see it, and how regularly you need to maintain those things. So yeah, that's kind of the stuff that falls into your zone 2 category.
Yeah, I think with that, so yeah, with any sort of small animal, I think that whether it's poultry or rabbits or whatever it is that you've got, I think yeah, if you're tending to them on that daily basis. So yeah, I think any sort of small animal management, so anything that you need to be checking in on a daily basis, sort of really falls into that zone too, because it is a high traffic area. It's not necessarily intensive, but it is a high traffic area. And again, that's that
Mm,
consideration of where you're actually going to be placing these elements for ease of access. Where do you naturally flow through your property to make it easy for you?
mm,
And again, like with compost, you don't want your
yeah.
compost down the back corner because you think, oh, that's a bit ugly, because you're never going to get down there to either add to it or to turn it or to manage it, check on it. You want to make sure that it's a nice, easy
Mm.
flow into that space, so you naturally head in that direction. So I think that's important as well.
I know some people do kind of put things like their compost a bit further out of the way, because it means they have to go down this path, which makes them observe. But it would still be considered your zone 2, even though it's not
Mm,
as close to the house. So I think that's what I was touching on before. It's not these concentric circles, that it
yeah.
has to be in this direct location. It can be maybe a bit further out, or at the edge of your orchard, so you're having to walk through your orchard, so you're paying attention to the bugs that are on there, or the leaves are turning yellow, and you can kind of notice these things and observe as you go to the compost. So when you're doing your bubble mapping in a way that you're like, okay, well, this is how often I do this thing, and maybe I could put it just on the edge of that zone,
Mm.
or that place there, so that you're forcing yourself to go through your property and, like you said, do a loop or a circle, or go down certain paths, so that you are noticing things in
Yeah.
different zones on your
And I
way through
think
your property.
that's a really good way of tying that back to self, understanding yourself and understanding what motivates you. So for one person, that would, yeah, force them or draw them down a particular area. And for someone else, they might just go, well, that's just, I don't have time, or it's too hard, or I don't think
Too
about it. So
hard, yeah.
it's understanding
Yeah.
yourself and your own motivations in how you actually behave, what your habits and your patterns and your behaviors are. So that's why, understanding yourself in this is
Mm.
really important, because, yeah, for you, you might be really motivated to do that. For me, I just go, oh, fuck, that's too hard. That's too far away. I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. And it, tomorrow never happened. I mean, I've done that, yeah, before.
I think that's why bubble mapping's good, because you can kind of move things around before you
Mm,
decide on a plan. And I think energy flow comes into this so much, patterns of human behavior, access and paths, those things are quite high on the scale of permanence, because it really does dictate how you flow through your property.
yeah.
It really does dictate human behavior and energy flow. Like, it's really important. You don't think a path could make that much of a difference, but when you
Oh, it
actually think
does.
about it, and how you're going and flowing through your block, it's a massive consideration.
It's huge. I mean, how many times have we had those situations where you might have been in, someone else's home, or you visited I don't know, accommodation or a restaurant or something like that, and you're sitting there and you're looking and you're going, now, why did they put that there? That doesn't make sense. Like, and you're watching the way people are moving through, that just doesn't make
Mm,
sense, why they maybe set the tables up like that in front of where the bathroom access is or something like that. It's because either someone has
mm,
had a thought and a consideration of, well, that makes sense to me because I would do this, or there's been no consideration of how
mm,
people would actually move through that space. Um, yeah, so I find that
yeah.
kind of, quite interesting, watching how other people move through those spaces as well. And again, that's a consideration. It's not just about you,
Mm,
self, zero, zero. It's about the other people on your property, or if you're looking to maybe on sell your property, what's going to make the
yeah.
most amount of sense, bigger picture, based on that scale of permanence. Because If it's not permanent, it can be moved.
Mm.
So it can always be changed.
We had that conversation with Will too about until you're somewhere for long enough, like in my situation
Mm.
where I haven't been here for very long, to have those observations or to think about how my habits might form or the energy flow on my block, because it is so bare. Like until the house is there, I don't know how I'm going to get to this place, or until the driveway is there, I'm not going to think about how I was driving, and we're not doing those things yet. So I think an important thing to think about there is that semi-permanent and being able to be flexible
Mm.
and change your design. And I've put garden beds in that are temporary because I don't actually know what the winter sun's going to do, and I don't actually know if it's going to be convenient for me once we have our kitchen. So yeah, be flexible and allow those things to change over time.
That's it. It's that slow and small solutions coming back out. We love that one. But it's so true because that's the thing that allows
Mm,
you to make the observations and make the adjustments and the changes that you need and have those aha moments of, oh, I hadn't noticed that before, either because I wasn't able to because the conditions weren't, such that I could, or I'm just now looking at it from a different place, from a different perspective. Yeah, yeah, really good.
yeah.
All right, zone three. So this zone is generally something, from again a time factor, generally once a week. So it's I suppose you could call it, say, a managed zone. And it's generally a larger scale food production. So if you're thinking about a property, it's things like your market gardens, larger scale gardening. It might be your larger livestock. So if you've got goats and sheep, um, it might be where they reside, because again you might be out there milking your goats, feeding your sheep, or doing whatever. It could be your larger scale orchards or your rambling type orchards that may not be as intensive, say if you had espalier systems potentially. And for the urban locations, zone 3 is really where you start looking at your community gardens. It's those bigger, broader spaces than just your backyard, but you can still have a zone 3 in your own backyard as well, right? So again, there's no hard and fast rules around what it means. It's just about how you perceive what you're doing in your garden. You might have a kitchen garden right at your back door, and then you might have 100 square meters of zone 3, which you might have a little mini market garden or some orchard, some fruit trees, um, or something like that that's a little bit
Yeah.
productive. You might have your chookies down there. So you might incorporate a zone 2 as well. But, for other people, they might have, a whole backyard is a zone 2 and a zone 1 because it's fully intensive. So, yeah, think bigger and broader than
Yeah.
just your own little
Yeah.
patch of what that includes.
Yeah, and in a zone three, in an urban space, espaliered orchard along your fence lines could be your zone three, or it could be that tiny little space in between your fence and your house that doesn't get a lot of sun in winter, but you get a bit of sun in summer, and you can put some, apple trees down there. It can be something quite small in an urban setting, so you don't have to think about it, as big fields or massive crops or massive orchards. Your zone three is just that place that is visited a lot less frequently, and once it's established, requires a lot less maintenance. So, minimal
Hmm.
maintenance and minimal care on a regular basis. So, yeah, once it's established, it can kind of take care of itself for the most part. You might go and prune it, once a year and give it a feed. So, there's lots of things I think in an urban space that could
Yeah.
definitely classify as your zone three, even if it is only, 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters. It's a fruit tree
Yeah,
instead of an
exactly.
orchard. Those things would be, yeah, your zone
Exactly.
threes in an urban space. It can also be water storage. So, it might not be a water tank that feeds into your house. It might be some, IBC tanks that you can fit down the side of
Hmm.
your property that you use in case of when the council says, no, you can't water your garden anymore, and they're your backup water for, hand watering your front garden or your veggie patch. So those kinds of things can be considered zone 3 in an urban setting.
Absolutely. And I suppose the other thing to consider too is not all properties or all setups have all zones either, right? Like, some places just
Yeah.
may not have, like, especially now we're getting into zone 4 and zone 5, they may not have that zone, because I mean, there's sort of, I suppose sometimes zone 4 and zone 5 can be collated together, but yeah, some properties just don't necessarily have that, in the immediate area. So zone 4, I
Mm.
suppose you could call it maybe a semi-wild zone, or a semi-managed area, maybe. So this is when we're talking about that. You might be going there maybe a couple of times a month, or once a month, or maybe even less than that. It might just be once a year, it might be
Mm-hmm.
a few times a year. But it really requires very, very minimal attention. So we're looking at things like regen ag. So rotational grazing, cell grazing, that type of thing. So this is when we're talking about a bigger property. But they're a plant once. You're not necessarily irrigating if you've got your systems in place for water catchment and storage. But you're going out there to plant up, and then you're going out there to check on it, and then you're harvesting. You're not out there every single day. It could be your bigger
Mm.
perennials for, again, diversity. So you're looking at, the trees that you've planted maybe on the border of your property to, bring in the diversity of the bugs and the birds and the wildlife. Maybe not the kangaroos. Um, we don't necessarily want to bring kangaroos in, right? Um, it could be your dams. So again, bigger property, your
Yeah.
dams, but our dam is, yeah, definitely a zone 4. Like I, go out there, and that's kind of grab a beer and, go and check it out, make sure that, everything's where it should be, and, talk to the animals and then walk back in. That's, how I sort of move
Yeah.
through my zone 4.
Yeah.
In your urban areas, places where there's minimal disturbance. So think of, those little corners of your property where, all the leaves fall down, and you don't necessarily, go and clean them up. You just leave them there to compost down, and there's really not much interaction from you. But when you go and sort of have a look, there's all this amazing diversity and life that's happening there. So that could be considered to be a zone 4 as well.
Mm.
What else do you think, Elise?
Mm. I I see zone 4s as like a part wild, part managed. So, if left to its own devices, it would be a zone 5, but we are interacting with it. We might come and thin out trees to collect timber. We might use it for foraging, going looking for wild mushrooms, and you might find weeds, or foraging mulberries from places that have them growing. I think, yeah, so it could be wild if it was left, but we're not leaving it. We are managing it in some way, thinning it out. We are intervening in some respect. So I think zone 4 in an urban context, in my mind, would be something like a reserve, like in Newcastle Black Butt Reserve, where it's mainly wild, but there's paths through there and you can walk, and there is human interaction in that zone 4 space. And then zone 5 is that completely unmanaged wild ecosystem. So it's total bush or forest where we don't have any intervention. And it's normally conservation spaces for urban
Mm-hmm.
settings, or on properties, that kind of fringe area where it bleeds into bushland or a
Mm-hmm.
forest. So it's a place where you can just observe and go and be a part of nature and witness the cycles of nature and reconnect, maybe meditate, and yeah, zero intervention in that space, just
Yep.
pure enjoyment.
Absolutely, yeah. The national parks, state forests, beaches, rivers, anywhere where, yeah, we just don't actively, manage it, unless maybe there might be some invasive weed control or something like that through land care groups and things like that. But, apart from that, it's just left to its own devices. The places where you go bushwalking to just go and absorb it all in and get away from, the noise of
Yeah.
life and technology and devices and pressures of life. Well, I do anyway. That to me is where I can go and go, and it's like it all just goes away, and I'm like, I could just walk through here, or sit here, or just, sit at the edge of a river and just, watch the little bugs on the top of the water, or watch the way the water eddies through the little rock pools, or, that to me is just absolute bliss.
Mm. And that brings us to the end of our zones. So, yeah, we hope this episode was insightful into how to start thinking about you inside your property and how you can start, I guess, planning so that you've got your site sector like we did with Will, and now you're kind of moving on to the next thing, which is your intentions, how you plan to use the property, your values, your vision for it, and then how that flows on to your zones and starting to kind of get a loose plan for what your property could look like and bubble mapping a little bit.
Absolutely. Consider those movements, those human behaviors, the habits that you have, how you move through, what you would like to achieve in that movement as well. Um, yeah, there's a lot to consider, but I think if you just start to unpack that slightly, and if you've already got an understanding about how you move through your property and you'd love to share that, definitely jump on to the Practical Permaculture Community Facebook group, because we'd love to hear about your experience and your observations with your zones. Because as we said at the start, everyone's context is different and everyone's situation is different. So what we consider one zone, you might consider something different for various reasons. And we'd love to have those conversations, because it helps everyone to get a deeper understanding and have different considerations that they may not have had. So maybe your comment might spark something in someone else to go, oh, wow, okay, this now helps me think about this particular area in a different way. And that could help them, plan on how they're going to move through the property. So jump on and share with us, because we'd love to hear from you. All right, fantastic. Well, that's it for this week. And we'll look forward to seeing you for our next episode, which will be a mini episode. Bye for now.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Practical Permaculture podcast. Jump onto our Facebook group to keep the chat going and to look for any resources that we mentioned on today's show. Look in the show notes.
And if you liked the episode today, then subscribe. Please give us a review and share. And if you didn't, then that's okay. We'll sure you'll find the right podcast for you.
Bye.
Bye.